I'd like to talk to you today about the clinical application of cannabinoids and terpenes, or terpenoids, for chronic illnesses. Because I think that what people really want to know is how to actually dose. You know, you have this cannabis plants, what do you actually do with them? And what do you use them for which diseases? So I'll very, very, very quickly go through the basics. If by Sunday afternoon at a cannabis conference you don't know what the endocannabinoid system is, then really there's probably not much point in explaining it at this point. But anyway, within our bodies we have this endogenous system that is the goal of the endocannabinoid system is homeostasis. It's to create a sort of balance or equilibrium within the body. And so the theories are, of course, that when you have imbalance or a lack of homeostasis in the body, that is when disease can occur. So the same way that you have all these other systems in your body, unfortunately, medical schools do not teach about the endocannabinoid system for the most part at this point, which is part of the big challenge that we have with the medical community, is they just don't understand it. They can tell you about the circulatory system, they can tell you about the nervous system, they can tell you about the gastrointestinal system, but they can't tell you about the endocannabinoid system because nobody bothered to tell them. Anyway, the same way that if you were not getting enough sunlight, for example, your doctor might prescribe for you to take vitamin D3 as a supplement. Your vitamin C levels are low, you might take vitamin C, you might eat oranges, you might take it as a supplement. It's the same thing with cannabis-based medicine. It is simply a phyto or a plant-based version of what your body produces on its own. If you don't have enough, you take it from an outside source, just like you would vitamin C or D3. It's really nothing much more sophisticated than that. There's been a whole lot of drama created around it and a lot of sexiness and a lot of other things, but it's really just giving you your body and a correct dose of cannabis. You don't really have to feel all that particularly altered if you have the correct amount, because if you keep in mind that homeostasis is the goal of cannabinoid therapy, then you only need to take it to the point where you have that. Now, we're not talking about serious things like cancer treatments and things, but in general, for most illnesses, you do not have to be greatly altered by it in order to have it successfully treat your diseases. Okay. So the next thing is, we may have heard a lot about terpenes or terpenoids. Terpenoids are simply terpenes in combination with other terpenes and other cannabinoids. They become these other forms that are just terpenoids. That's an oversimplification, but it's really enough to know. So no one's really talking about anything different when they're talking about terpenoids. They're just sounding more technical. Anyway, a couple examples you have of terpenes are alpha-pinene and limonene. Now, alpha-pinene is found in pine trees also, and it's also in many cannabis strains, especially in cannabis in the more sativa-type cannabis strains. And then limonene, it's found in lemon rinds and in some strains of cannabis as well, also frequently shown in sativa. I'll tell you an interesting personal experience. I got on an airplane on an international flight recently, and I was exhausted and irritable, and it had been a bad travel day. And the first thing that the flight attendant did was bring me a wet towel that was scented with lemon. And I put it up to my face, and I had this overwhelming calm and sense of well-being that came over me. And that's very much the same limonene that's in cannabis. So a lemon is a lemon is a lemon, wherever you find the benefits of it. Anyway, so down here are some of the more common ones we have is the alpha-pinene, like I mentioned, which also is from the pine trees. You have linalool, which is very effective as an analgesic, anti-anxiety, and it's found in lavender. You know, when you go get a massage, they have the room, it's all scented with lavender. We have these same components right in our cannabis plants. Beta-caryophyllene. Now, beta-caryophyllene is the most abundant in something called Ashanti pepper. It's black Ashanti pepper, white, cannabis, and then black pepper and white pepper. So whenever the man at the restaurant comes around with the grinder asking if you want some pepper on your food, you say yes, please, because you will be, in fact, activating your CB2 receptor sites when you eat black pepper. Beta-caryophyllene is one of the only known substances outside of cannabis specifically that acts directly on the CB2 receptor sites without interfering with the uptake of the THC. So it's very, very helpful for that. So we look for strains that are very high in beta-caryophyllene, especially if we're dealing with diseases where there's a lot of CB2 receptor sites. Now, myrcene is found very often it's found in hops, but it's also found in mangoes. There's an old hippie trick of eating a mango before you get high to increase it. Well, what's really happening is the myrcene cuts through the blood-brain barrier and makes you have a higher uptake of the cannabinoids, which is why it makes you higher, and so you don't really have to use this. But it also has a very much of a sedative effect as well. You find it more in your indica-type strains, and I'll go into a little more about what those terms even mean in a minute. But myrcene is very, very helpful, especially when you're dealing with very, very serious chronic diseases. Then limonene, as I said, it's great for acid reflux. It's good as an anti-anxiety and antidepressant, and it's found in lemons. Now, let's talk about the importance of the entourage effect. This is an important comment that at the beginning, Stuart Smith, who is my partner in this, he says all the time, you just don't have any Marinol addicts. And the reason it is THC on its own feels pretty crappy. It is not a fun medicine. So it's not the THC that everybody wants. It's the THC in conjunction with the other cannabinoids and the other terpenes that have this entourage effect that we talk about that actually creates the various sensations. Because THC on its own is not very welcomed. Yes, and some people have some limited results with nausea and maybe going through chemotherapy, things like that. But for the most part, it is not a very pleasant substance on its own. It's far more effective when it's mixed with the other things. Now, right now we know we have about approximately 100, I read something different all the time, about 100 different cannabinoids and about 500 different terpenes. I have not run the math, but if you take how many possible combinations there are of those that can be in plants, it's close to infinite. It's a huge, huge number of different combinations we could have of cannabinoids and terpenes that each could be used medicinally in combinations for different things.